The young and the restless spoilers shock. In the aftermath of that fateful night at society, Amanda Sinclair found herself teetering on a precipice from which there would be no safe return. She was, by all accounts, the one person in Genoa City who possessed the most intimate knowledge of Aristotle Dumas's empire, his shell corporations, his offshore holdings, the clandestine channels through which he funneled millions into ventures both legal and illicit. As his legal representative, she had drafted countless contracts, negotiated terms that obscured ownership, and vetted partners who would serve as his public faces. Now, poised between gratitude and terror, she had come to understand that knowledge was both her greatest asset and her most perilous liability. Every clause she had written, every seal she had affixed bore the weight of potential betrayal. And in a world governed by power brokers like Victor Newman and Jack Abbott, her expertise made her a target worth pursuing. It was said that an enigmatic new assistant would soon emerge from the shadows, dispatched by Dumas himself to oversee Amanda's actions with an even sterner eye. The mere rumor of this aide's arrival sent ripples through the corridors of high finance and backroom dealings alike. For Amanda, already burdened by the knowledge that her every move was recorded and analyzed, the prospect was unsettling. Yet she convinced herself that she could still manage the delicate balancing act, keep one foot in Dumas's world, the other in the orbit of Genoa City's most formidable titans. After all, if she could orchestrate alliances between Dumas and the likes of Victor and Jack, she would retain her position as the indispensable linchpin in a network of shifting loyalties. That tenuous sense of control was shattered the moment Victor Newman decided to play his hand. Victor, ever the consummate strategist, had surmised that Amanda's allegiance to Dumas would eventually conflict with his own interests. He knew that the legal counsel who could navigate Dumas's labyrinthine holdings could just as easily reroute funds, delay transactions, or expose vulnerabilities. So he began his campaign of seduction and subterfuge. Extravagant dinners in private rooms, promises of a partnership that would rival anything Dumas could offer, and envelopes overflowing with crisp bills slipped beneath boardroom doors. At first, Amanda resisted, with polite refusals and assurances that her loyalty lay with her existing client. But Victor's persistence was unrelenting. He knew how to appeal to her vanity as much as her greed, painting a future in which she would stand at the helm of a media consortium he would bankroll, free from the moral ambiguities of Dumas's empire. His offer was intoxicating, and she accepted, first in principle, then in deed. What Amanda failed to appreciate was the depth of Dumas's ruthlessness. Aristotle Dumas was no mere corporate magnate. He was a predator who wielded his fortunes like a scythe, cutting down anyone who dared to cross him. Amanda had once believed that her position as his counsel insulated her from retribution, that her value would protect her from his wrath. But when the rumors reached Dumas's inner circle that Victor Newman had obtained her counsel's insights into Dumas's hidden compounds and safehouses, the line between suspicion and betrayal evaporated. Dumas's emissaries observed Amanda's nocturnal meetings with Victor's envoys, traced her encrypted messages, and noted the transfer of funds into offshore accounts registered under her name. By the time Amanda realized the magnitude of her transgression, the die had been cast. A terse message flashed across her secure line just before midnight, a simple statement in Dumas's unmistakable cadence: "You have breached the covenant. The price of your error will be counted in blood." In that moment, the gravity of her situation overwhelmed her. She had betrayed not only a client but a man whose capacity for vengeance was unparalleled. The warning was clear: she would die if she continued on this path. Yet, in that same breath, she felt a darker pull, the intoxicating high of having outmaneuvered a titan, even if only for a fleeting moment. She convinced herself that she could still avert disaster. By extracting every last dollar from Victor, by vanishing into a safe harbor before Dumas's hunters could descend. It was a gamble as audacious as it was desperate. But Dumas was already kilometers away, mobilizing his most trusted operatives, mercenaries whose names appeared only in hushed whispers, tasked with one mission: track down Amanda Sinclair and silence her forever. They would not seek her in the gilded halls of Genoa City but in the shadows where she believed herself secure. A parking garage beneath a derelict office building, a secluded guest house on the outskirts of town, a penthouse suite secured by the most sophisticated alarms money could buy, none of these places would protect her. The hunters would come for her at sunrise, their orders precise, no negotiations, no second chances. Amanda's world, once defined by contracts and legal briefs, would be reduced to a single question: how much pain could she endure before the life drained from her eyes? As she sat curled on the floor of her dimly lit study, counting the money Victor had deposited into her account, Amanda realized that she had played with fire and was now consumed by its flames. The walls around her, once symbols of her power, felt like the bars of a cage closing in. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling, and scrolled through her contacts: a private jet chartered under a false identity, a safe house code she had never used, a list of passwords to burner accounts. There was still time, just enough time to vanish beyond Dumas's reach, if only she could act before the hunters arrived. Behind her closed door, the night remained silent, but Amanda knew that the darkness held more than shadows. It held her fate, and she was running out of places to hide. The final act in this deadly drama was about to begin, and Amanda Sinclair, once the master of hidden truths, would soon discover whether the power of a contract could outmatch the ferocity of a monster intent on revenge. In the hollow glare of her downtown safe house, Amanda felt the walls closing in. Every message she sent and received now carried the weight of life and death, and even the steady thrum of the city beyond her window sounded like the footsteps of hunters closing in. She moved methodically, stowing forged passports in a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, packing a suitcase with essentials chosen not for comfort but for necessity, and slipping a small pistol into the inner pocket of her coat. Gone were the days when her greatest worry had been drafting contracts or negotiating terms. Now it was simply staying one step ahead of Aristotle Dumas's wrath. She'd known from the moment she'd betrayed him, betrayed the man whose empire she'd helped build, that there would be no forgiveness, no mercy. Dumas was not a man to be crossed and pardoned. He was the very definition of a monster, and monsters did not tolerate transgressions. To him, every slight demanded blood. Late that afternoon, when the sun angled low enough to throw long shadows down the alley behind her safe house, Amanda watched the empty street through slitted blinds. Victor had promised to protect her, an uneasy alliance born of desperation rather than loyalty, but even his considerable resources seemed powerless once Dumas set his sights on a target. She thought of the hush of his private jet tarmac, of the flickering confidence in his eyes when he first offered her sanctuary, and she wondered if he truly comprehended what it meant to face Aristotle Dumas's fury. Word had reached her that Victor's operatives had been compromised. That a leak within his circle had alerted Dumas to every plan, every contingency, every far-flung safehouse in which she might seek refuge. It was as if the shadow of the man she had betrayed extended farther than any lawyer's imagination could anticipate, stamping out escape routes before she even conceived them. Amanda forced herself to breathe steadily and pressed a trembling hand to the cold glass. She could not afford panic. Fear was Dumas's weapon, and she would not grant him the satisfaction of watching her unravel. She needed a plan, and she needed Victor's help more than ever, even if his own attempts at protection had already been thwarted. Summoning every ounce of resolve, she keyed a secure line to him. Her voice, when it came, was barely more than a whisper, a lifeline cast into a storm. "Victor," she murmured, "they know everything. Dumas is coming for me. I need you to keep me alive." She felt her throat constrict, guilt and regret mingling with terror. She had never imagined pleading like this, never pictured herself at the mercy of another's clemency. Yet here she was, admitting her vulnerability to the one man whose power might, just might, counterbalance Dumas's reach. On the other end, she could almost hear Victor's sigh, steady and businesslike even at the edge of panic. "I'm mobilizing every asset," he assured her, but his words rang hollow against the truth she already knew. Dumas's hunters were faster, smarter, and utterly without conscience. There was no room for mercy in their orders. Amanda's pulse pounded as she listened to the faint scratchel of Victor's assurances: motorcade convoys, decoy residences, armored vehicles on standby, but she felt each promise erode under the knowledge that Dumas had anticipated every move. He had always been 2 steps ahead in their cat-and-mouse game, and now he held the ultimate leverage: her life. As she ended the call and rose to her feet, Amanda's reflection in the window startled her. Gone was the composed legal professional whom Genoa City had known. In her place was a hunted woman, eyes shadowed with fear, shoulders taut with the weight of betrayal. She gathered her belongings into the battered leather satchel. Documents that could once have toppled corporations, a flash drive containing evidence of Dumas's darkest dealings, and slipped the satchel over her shoulder. There was no time for second thoughts. Tonight, she would slip into the night and chase the slender hope that somewhere beyond the city's borders, she might exist beyond Dumas's vengeance. She stepped onto the fire escape, her boots clicking against iron rungs as she descended into the alley. The sky above was turning from bruised purple to ink black, and the streetlights flickered on, casting pools of pale light that became islands of vulnerability. Amanda paused, listening for any sign that she had been marked: footsteps, the idle hum of a black sedan's engine, the distant drone of helicopters. There was nothing but the hum of traffic on the main thoroughfare, the far-off murmur of late-night workers, and the rustle of wind through litter. But she refused to be lulled into complacency. Every sense was sharpened to a knife's edge. Reaching the end of the alley, she melted into the flow of pedestrians exiting a late screening at the small art house cinema. She held her head high, adopting a neutral expression as she allowed herself to be swept along with the crowd. Each breath was a silent prayer that Dumas's hunters would not find her in the sea of faces. Her destination was a rental car parked 2 blocks away, registered under an alias she had prepared months earlier, a car that would carry her toward a rendezvous with Victor's most trusted protector, a former intelligence operative now on retainer. If she could make contact without interception, she might still secure a route out of the city. But if that failed, she knew every highway and rural lane was patrolled by Dumas's agents. He would stop at nothing. Amanda moved with purpose, passing neon signs and closed storefronts until she slipped from the main street into a quieter residential road. She counted her steps, timed her pauses at intersections, and kept to the shadows whenever possible. The air was cool, tasted faintly of rain, and she wondered if the storm that threatened overhead might aid her escape: extra cover, extra chaos to blend into. When she finally reached the rented sedan, she fumbled with the keys, her fingers trembling, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine's roar was a small comfort, a baritone promise of movement, of potential freedom. She pulled away from the curb and into the night, heart clenching with each flicker of taillight she thought might signal a pursuer. Yet even as she accelerated onto the highway, Amanda felt the hand of dread tighten around her spine. Dumas's monsters would not relent. They would track her global, from city to city, across borders. The life she had known, the late-night negotiations, the quiet power of being the one who understood every hidden clause, was gone. Her world had become a fugitive's labyrinth, where every shadow could conceal death and every calm horizon might lead to ruin. Still, she pressed onward, driven by the singular hope that Victor, flawed though he was, could outmaneuver Aristotle Dumas, that his resources might yet erect a fortress impenetrable even to a monster's wrath. In the rearview mirror, the glow of Genoa City receded, and Amanda allowed herself a momentary flicker of hope. Perhaps beyond the city limits, there existed a place where contracts held no sway and monsters lost their breath in pursuit. Perhaps in that uncharted distance lay salvation. But until then, she would drive through the darkness, clutching her secrets and her fear, knowing that every mile brought her one step closer to an outcome she could neither control nor fully imagine, and that the next dawn would reveal whether she was the victor of this deadly game or merely another casualty in Aristotle Dumas's inexorable rise. Phyllis Spectra stepped out of the sleek glass elevator and into the hushed calm of Amanda Sinclair's private suite, her heels clicking against the polished floor like the ticking of an unseen clock. She carried with her the spark of ambition that had flickered to life in her mind during the long nights spent poring over reports, sketching diagrams, and dreaming of what could be. Amanda sat behind an expansive mahogany desk, reviewing documents that bore the weight of Dumas's empire. Contracts, confidentiality agreements, and forensic analyses of offshore holdings. When she looked up, her expression was polite but guarded, as though braced for another round in their ongoing tug-of-war over Phyllis's future. Phyllis inhaled deeply, steadying herself, then launched into the heart of her proposal without hesitation. She sketched broad strokes of many small projects under one roof, an umbrella entity that would harness the disruptive power of artificial intelligence, the boundless reach of digital media, and the magnetism of carefully cultivated influencers. Imagine, she said, her voice firm, a single platform where emerging technologies and creative voices coalesce to redefine how audiences consume content, a community that thrives on innovation and authenticity. Amanda listened without interrupting, fingers steepled beneath her chin. When Phyllis paused, the older woman shook her head ever so slightly. "You've given me buzzwords," she said calmly, "but no substance. Dumas doesn't invest in media ventures. His interests lie elsewhere: pharma, real estate, discrete acquisitions that yield control, not followers." Phyllis felt a flicker of annoyance but pushed it aside. She had anticipated resistance. What she hadn't anticipated was Amanda's impatience. "Then why," Phyllis countered, leaning forward, "did he reach out to Billy Abbott about Chancellor Media? He must see potential in that sphere." Amanda's eyes narrowed. Dumas's outreach to Mr. Abbott was strategic. Chancellor Publications owns intellectual property that aligns with his other assets. He's hedging his bets. It's not a vote of confidence in your vision. The implication stung. Phyllis's grand plans were collateral, not the target. Undeterred, Phyllis maintained her composure as she pressed on. "I'm not asking for a handout," she insisted. "I'm offering him exponential growth, access to emerging markets, a chance to be front and center in the digital renaissance. What he needs is someone who understands narrative in its purest form, someone who can shape public perception and drive engagement." Amanda exhaled slowly, tapping a pen against her desk. "You're conflating social media metrics with strategic investment. Dumas wants control, predictability, guaranteed returns. Influencers and AI can be volatile, unreliable." Phyllis's jaw tightened. She sensed Amanda's anxiety, not for Dumas, but for herself. Amanda had counseled countless clients through perilous deals. She knew better than to entangle herself in a venture without ironclad assurances. Yet Phyllis understood that fear cut both ways. She needed Dumas's backing more desperately than ever, and she would not relent until she had extracted a commitment. Finally, Amanda stood and walked around the desk, her posture softening. "I can't make him change his mind," she said gently. "If he's decided that media isn't his priority, then pressing him will only burn the bridge you need." Phyllis steadied her gaze. "Then I'll find another way in," she answered. The words slipped out before she could second-guess the concession. Another stroke of candor in a sea of half-truths. Amanda's eyes flickered with concern. "Be careful, Phyllis. You don't have deep pockets anymore. You're risking everything." Phyllis nodded, acknowledging the peril, but her mind had already shifted to the next play. She extended her hand in farewell, the steel beneath her velvet glove a reminder of the resolve beneath her silk exterior. Once Amanda left, Phyllis closed the door and allowed herself a moment to breathe. The corridor beyond hummed with the distant murmur of office life, a stark contrast to the electric tension she'd just shed. She retrieved her phone from the pocket of her trench coat and dialed Summer. When Summer answered with her warm, familiar voice, Phyllis felt the corners of her lips lift in a genuine smile. She told her daughter how proud she was of the tenacity and creativity Summer had shown in her own entrepreneurial ventures, weaving in references to Summer's recent successes on social media and her knack for spotting trends before they went mainstream. Summer's laughter, bright and encouraging, buoyed Phyllis's spirits, reminding her of the unbreakable bond they shared, a bond that no corporate shark could sever. After half an hour of light-hearted banter, recipes exchanged, weekend plans laid out, Phyllis found her thoughts drifting to Daniel. The memory of his steady support and unspoken understanding stirred something in her heart. Yet she could not linger on sentiment. Instead, she tapped Nick's number with purpose. When Nick's familiar greeting sounded, she thanked him for his kindness and for the words of wisdom he had offered her after her fallout with Billy, words that had given her the strength to see this moment through. She explained that she'd been considering his offer to stand by her side, not just as a business ally but as someone who believed in her vision unconditionally. Nick's voice softened with both pride and concern as he assured her that whatever path she chose, he was there. Phyllis ended the call feeling the tide of possibility shift beneath her feet. She tucked her phone away and surveyed her reflection in the glass, eyes alight with determination, lips set in a curve of quiet resolve. Amanda's skepticism had been expected. Dumas's reluctance was a hurdle to overcome, not a barrier to stop at.